right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for being here to go over Field Underwriting Guide 101. We're going to get into some nitty-gritty of that. And this is the January 2026 kickoff to our PFA webinars. I cannot believe that we are already in 2026. Crazy, but welcome. Thank you for being here. For all of you that don't know, my name is Sarah Dolk. I am the director over the PFA Underwriting Group. I have been the director over this group for about 2.5, 3 years now. I love, love, love working with all the PFA agents. They are second to none. So I won't be going anywhere anytime soon. But I want to let our panelists also introduce themselves. We have Jenna Goodrich, which I know you guys have seen on many, many of these presentations, and then Trevor Walter, who is an underwriter on my team, who is fantastic, and he has come to help participate and facilitate this as well. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves and then we'll get started.
Everyone, I'm Jenna. If you don't know me, I've been with PFA now my entire career at National Life Group, so almost 4 years. And I, like Sarah, I'm not going anywhere. It's good to know nobody on the PFA team here at NLG wants to leave this team. We all fight aggressively to be here. We love working with you guys. I've been underwriting almost 30 years now, so got a little bit of life left in me. And I am very much devoted to you guys and to these presentations where I hope you get a lot of information. And Trevor, you are on mute.
Hey everyone, my name's Trevor. Similar to Jenna, I started with PFA at National Life and I haven't left since. I've been here almost 2 years and underwriting for about six.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So I will go ahead and present my screen. Jenna or Trevor, let me know when you can see it.
Got it.
Can see it.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So like I said, we're going to start and go over navigating the field underwriting guide, and then we are going to look at some easy underwriting new updates and guidelines. So this will be on our agenda today. We're going to go over some year-to-date statistics because I want to ensure that we start off the new year right. We get those submissions in, and so I want you to see how good the business is. Then we're going to give you a little taste of who is on your PFA underwriting team and case management team. Then I'll pass it over to Jenna to go over the field underwriting guide and probing questions. Trevor's going to take us into some case studies, and then we're going to finish up with our new easy underwriting limits and expansions that just rolled out 2 days ago. So let's jump right in. So the underwriting and new business teams. So if you guys don't know, you have a dedicated realm of underwriters that just work your business. So on the specialized team, which is my group, we have 12 underwriters that are dedicated solely to the PFA business. And this is not common. Any other insurance company at National Life, you guys are the only ones that have a dedicated team to work your business. But we also have a diamond and large case team that houses 7 underwriters that do more of those large cases, that concierge type of service. So you have 7 of those underwriters in addition to the 12 that work the PFA business. And then we have new business case managers, and there are 12 of those. That when we approve a case in underwriting, they take care of all the issue stuff. Before we even get the case, they put the case in good order. So we could not do this without our case managers issuing those policies. So I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of the dedicated team that you have at your disposal for any questions, updates, all that good stuff. So, service level summary. So, I wanted to show you some stats on where the business is and how well the NLG and PFA team do in working together. So, these statistics are from the last 30 days. I wanted to make sure that we capture the most relevant, up to date data. So, if you look at that first chart there where it says submit to initial review, we are averaging 83% of the PFA business reviewing those in 0 to 2 days. Fantastic, fantastic turnaround times. 83% of the business, huge. Then if you look, submit to approval. So this is when we are in underwriting, approve a case. 66% of the PFA business is approved in 0 to 2 days. Huge. Even 12% is approved in 3 to 5. So this just goes to show how awesome the turnaround times are because of how great our partnership is. Then submit to issue. So this is when the case managers get it after we approve it and they go in and issue it. 42% are 0 to 2 days. So you see that I have a theme going here that the highest bucket of work is getting done within 0 to 2 days. Outstanding stuff. And then agent correspondence. So 24%, which I think is a pretty high number, is getting same day responses. So that means when you put in an email in the Ascend portal, we're getting to that 24% of the time, same day. Huge. Even bigger, 46% are getting answered within 1 day. So in all activities in all areas of the business, we're really keeping the turnarounds time really, really tight at 2 days or less. So just a fantastic, fantastic summary of how well we're starting off January. Okay, now I'm going to pass it over to Jenna, and she's going to go into the nitty-gritty of what is field underwriting.
Yes. So I'm very excited to talk about field underwriting. And before I even start, I want to remind everyone, if this is your first time joining us, or if you have joined us previously, we really like audience participation. We want this to be informal. We want you guys to ask your questions. Don't be shy. You have 3 of the greatest underwriting minds right now at your disposal. So I want you to take advantage of that opportunity. We will do our best to get to all the questions we can, either in the Q&As or in the chat, or maybe right through the presentation. So I'm going to talk about the field underwriting guide. And the first thing we're going to talk about is, where do I find it, Jenna? So if you go into the agent portal, you're going to see this little screen that's on the bottom left here, and you will see underwriting is off to the right-hand side. If you click on that push button, that's going to pull up the Life Underwriting Reference Guide. It's also going to pull up for Nationals and X-Ray. And I will talk a little bit about X-Ray as we go through guidelines. So what pages should I bookmark? So financial and juvenile guidelines start on page 12. And these are really important, page 12 to 13, to have our juvenile guidelines about how much coverage can I apply for on this child. Does it depend on how much coverage parent has? How much coverage does parent have? And so what does that mean for the child? And of course, there's also special inclusion for New York. So those of you that are suffering here with me in New York, we have our own special guidelines about how much coverage can be applied for on the child based on parental coverage and the child's age. So for any kind of juvenile guidelines, you want to go there to look at how much can I apply for. We've got a list of uninsurable and problematic risks that start on page 35. This is a pretty lengthy list, and I don't want you to assume, I know it says an application should not be submitted, but this is probably the time when you want to utilize X-Ray. When you have information about something that's on that problematic risk list, let's say criminal history, maybe you want to reach out through X-Ray and say, hey, I have this person that has this history. How are we going to handle this? So he had a number of traffic tickets, but his MVR is clear and currently valid. Can we accept this? He has a history of a drug violation 25 years ago when he was young and stupid, because let's face it, we were all young and stupid at one point. But he's doing well now. He has a professional job. He's got a family. He doesn't use drugs. He has no other medical history, and third parties look great. How should I handle that? We're going to try and look at some of these problematic risks on an individual consideration basis to see, is it possible to make an offer? There are going to be cases of criminal history that I can make an offer, as long as I have enough positives that I can outweigh any of those negatives. The problems come when we see people committing crimes when they're adults, committing multiple crimes, recent crimes. And when I say recent, we're talking about within the last 10 years, I would consider recent. Certainly people that have multiple felonies are going to be a decline, and usually that is not something we can reconsider in the future. Again, if they were young and stupid, I want to be able to make an exception. But if they were young and stupid once and then they continue doing stupid things as adults, that's another case entirely. But definitely look at those conditions to see, is this something that I need to be concerned about? And do I utilize X-ray if I want special consideration? We've also got foreign national guidelines starting on page 39. We know a lot of you have some foreign nationals that are applying for coverage. We at National Life Group have a very unique perspective and a niche in the market, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to foreign national guidelines, because we do accept people that are not US citizens. And the majority of companies in our industry do not allow for that. But we do have special considerations that have to be filled for foreign national guidelines. So there might be limitations on the amount of coverage that needs to be applied for. There needs to be nexus to the US. They need to have some medical history. Certainly we have cases that people are young and don't go, and that's fine too, but those considerations need to be taken into account. So make sure you familiarize yourself with those foreign national guidelines. The link is available on page 39. Then we have medical conditions that start on page 40 with probable action. So if someone says to you, I have depression, you want to think to yourself, oh goodness, how are we going to handle that? So you can go in here and see. Now, of course, some of these considerations or some of these guidelines, including depression, are going to say things like it could be standard through decline. Those, it really depends on the details that we're able to obtain. But this is a great list for you to find out what's probably going to happen with this, because we want you to be able to quote something that's reasonable. Certainly, we all want to try and get everybody elite preferred rates if we can. And that's something that we in underwriting are going to do regardless of what medical history is presented. We're always going to give you the best rate we possibly can. But we also want to be realistic when you guys are selling these policies. If you sell the policy as elite, and then it turns out they have medical history that automatically makes them ineligible for elite, it's not going to be an easy sell for you later on when we say, oh, we can only offer standard or we can only offer express. So these pages will really give you a better understanding of what is most likely to happen. And certainly, if you're not sure, I think the safest thing you can do is either use X-ray to get a quote or to quote standard. We want you guys to look good, and it's no skin off our teeth to make you look good if you quote standard and we can offer better than standard. Frankly, I don't care if you guys go back to the insured and embellish just a little bit. Hey, I know we quoted standard on this, but I talked to the underwriter and told them what a great risk you are, and we were able to get preferred rates. That doesn't hurt us in underwriting whatsoever. So we want you guys to look good in front of those clients. So when in doubt, you can just go with standard. I am very hesitant to tell people to rate better than standard just because things can pop up, and we really want to maintain, good expectations on the insured's part that they know what is likely to happen. We don't want you guys looking bad, even though, the rate class is correct when we send it out. It still looks bad if we quoted better than that. So you're going to say, hey, Jenna, what do I do with all these medical conditions? I'm not a doctor. I'm not an underwriter. How am I supposed to know anything about these conditions? And the truth is, you don't have to know anything about these conditions. You can ask probing questions regardless of whatever medical question is answered yes, to give us more details. And when I talk about details, the more you can include on the application, the less we have to hunt for. When we get indications of something that wasn't on the application, we're going to have to go investigate more. And that means either ordering something like an exam in labs, ordering medical records, sending out questions for you to ask the insured, all of these extra touches, which are going to add to that time service of issue or review to issue or review to approval in underwriting. And we want to shorten those as much as we possibly can, because we know here in underwriting that the faster we can get an approval to you guys, the more likely that sale is gonna go through. So what are these questions? You can ask, what was the diagnosis? When was it made? How are they currently being treated? Who's the doctor treating this? So I've got a 3-year-old kid who, he had a history of an upper respiratory infection, last year, and the doctor put him on albuterol. He's fully recovered and hasn't used the medication since. And here's the doctor's information. Great, I can run with that. Some of you might have noticed that if there's admitted medication use in young juveniles, particularly for respiratory conditions, that case might automatically be declined because our system gets very confused and says, wait a second, we've got serious medications here and we don't have any explanation. So even if you think that it's not a big deal, or the insured's parent or insured thinks their medical history is no big deal, if accurately answered questions on the application are yes, we should include these details. It really helps us a lot in underwriting. Contrary to popular belief, we're here to issue policies. So when we see medical history, it doesn't mean that we're not going to make an offer. The majority of times we can make an offer on a lot of conditions that might sound scary. So not just juveniles, but oh, I had a normal pap smear 6 months ago. Here's where the doctor's information can be located. I had cancer 10 years ago. This is how it was treated, and this is the doctor where you can get the information. Now, certain conditions like cancer, we might still ask for additional information because there might be something like a pathology report. And that's going to tell us the details of the staging of the cancer and type of cancer that will help us come to a rate class. But these questions you can ask for any condition that someone answers yes to. So I want to go over, I see some questions here. Jenna, does the premium go lower with a better rating? Yes. Obviously, an elite rating is going to have a lower premium. And I know the tendency is to try and sell a policy based on a low price. But from an underwriting standpoint, there's always somebody that can make a better offer. If you're looking for the cheapest, there's always somebody out there that's willing to take a case for a cheaper rate. Does that mean it's actually going to cover the risk? Not necessarily. And what we have to do is make sure that we're fair to all of our insureds and to the company itself to make sure we're able to cover claims when they happen. So we don't offer sales. If someone has a certain rate, that's the rate they get. But again, if you're only going for lowest price, it might not work out. So we really try here to focus on customer service. And I think, that's why we have you guys, agents, providing that personalized customer service to our clients. And that is a huge, huge thing that is more important than who has the lowest price. Let me see if I see a more favorable rating. Yes, Trevor, that is correct. What's the standard required qualification to get elite? Well, there are guidelines, again, in the Life Underwriting Reference Guide. I believe it starts on, I want to say page 30. Let me see here. I have it right here. Okay, starting on page 28. Is it 28, Trevor?
Yes.
29. Starting on page 29, we have charts that you can use to help you figure out if someone is better than a standard risk. And it's not going to have everything, obviously, but some of the basics that most insureds are going to know about themselves, whether they've used nicotine or not, what their family history is, what their cholesterol is, these types of things you can use to find out, is someone going to qualify for better than standard rates? I would just make sure you keep in mind that you're looking at the correct page, because some of them are for permanent plans, some of them are for term plans, some of them are when we don't do full underwriting. So if we're doing easy underwriting, that's a different guideline than if we're ordering a full medical. How long after the client quits tobacco can we apply to change the non-tobacco? So an insured has to be nicotine-free, all forms of nicotine, including things like the patch, for 1 full year, and the policy also has to be enforced for 1 year. So that's not something we actually see over here in underwriting. That goes to our policy change team. Another one asking about the premium on illustrations. That I couldn't comment on. There is extra discounts for elite, so I'm not quite sure why you're getting the same premium, unless that's actually what you indicated as the planned premium, because that is up to the insured and can change. Any other questions here? Did I get to all of them?
So I know that Jenna at the beginning of this presentation said that we like to make it very informal. And so I want to ask specifically on these probing questions, is this something that you guys feel comfortable asking your applicants? Is this something that you would do moving forward? You can just put yes or no or maybe in the chat, but I want to make sure that these are going to be helpful to you while you field underwrite some of these applicants.
And we know some of the topics that people might say yes to are sensitive,
Awesome.
which is why these questions are limited. We certainly don't expect you to dive into their psychiatric history or if they have an alcohol or drug history. We don't expect you to be answering super detailed questions about those conditions. Sometimes insureds don't admit to those conditions because they are sensitive. You know, if it's something you're not comfortable with, that's okay. We'll do the heavy lifting. And I know somebody had asked about MIB. Yes, we do run. Everyone gets a search on MIB. Everyone gets a search on our prescription history, Milliman reports, MVRs, lab picture. That is for everyone. Those third parties really help us avoid having to get medical records or exams and labs in a lot of cases. And just to throw out there that, you know, when we see things on those third-party reports, those are actually provided in a database that the insured's doctors access, like when they're requesting payment from insurance. They have to say, here's why. Let's see. Yes, Dragon and Caitlin are fantastic. What is MIB, the Medical Information Bureau? So let's say someone applies for insurance here and they know they have a serious medical problem. They know that they were just diagnosed with cancer in the last year and they're undergoing treatment and they realize, my God, I don't have life insurance. Let me go apply, but I'm just not going to tell them. And hopefully they won't find out. So usually between MIB and third parties, we will find out. So, but in case we don't, we run the MIB, let's say it comes back clear, and we find through other sources that this person has cancer and is currently undergoing treatment. We would enter a code, and it is not a code that can be easily identified. It is a jumble of numbers and letters that only make sense to underwriters and to the MIB company. And when somebody, when that insured gets declined by us, let's say they say, oh, I'm going to go to this other company and just not tell them about it and see if they will offer me coverage. When they run an MIB, they're going to see the codes that we entered and they're going to say, wait a second, there's some history here we have to investigate. So they might order additional requirements when they see a hint like that. So it is just one of those protections to make sure that if someone has concerning history and they're trying to shop around and just avoid telling their history to get coverage, that we're protected. When a client disagrees with LexisNexis, how often do you change the approval rate? Is it worth the client fighting the report? If they feel the information is incorrect, they should always obtain a copy of that report and open a dispute. That is regardless of whether we can change the rate class or not. If there are mistakes in there, this is kind of like a credit report. It will continue to be there until it falls off, which could be what, 7+ years. So if something is incorrect, I highly encourage people to get a copy of those reports and open a dispute with them to get it corrected. Now, whether that has an impact on our underwriting decision is another question. Historically, I think we've had something like 0.003 changes to the report. So it's very, very few where we actually find that something has been incorrect in those reports. And usually it's not material. So it's things like a date was incorrect or the doctor's information was incorrect. It is not usually, hey, we reported cancer and they actually never had this. But again, if the insured says, hey, wait a second, I've never had this condition, that is something to take up with dispute. We also encourage people to discuss with their physicians. Historically, I have seen that some doctors are not very good at explaining medical issues or explaining in a way that an insured can understand. Or, sometimes people think, yeah, I was diagnosed with diabetes, but I take a pill now, so I don't have it anymore. And that's not really how that disease works. And that could be a miscommunication between the doctor and the insured. But the information that comes on these reports is from the medical providers. It is not something that's made up or created by anyone else. So usually Milliman or Lab Picture will work with that doctor and the insured to get any corrections made. That can be a lengthy process, and we can't always change things in underwriting until we have that report and when we have medical records that verify the information.
So Jenna, I want to pause on the
Yeah.
questions so we can get to some case studies, and then we'll
Yes.
revert back to some questions to make sure we answer
Okay.
them all.
No
But
problem.
I know Trevor's got us in the chat, so thank you, Trevor.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. So I'll jump to case study number 1. We have a 31-year-old female applying for $2 million of Living Life Defender. Her height and weight is 5'4", 180. The agent quoted preferred non-tobacco. Third-party reports come back and it's all clear, which I would expect for a 31-year-old, and we approved standard non-tobacco, but it was other than applied for. So the agent emails and said, hey, wait a second, can my client have a reconsideration for preferred rates? I don't understand why she was only getting standard. She looks like a great risk. And our response was, based on the field underwriting guide on page 30, the client only qualifies for standard non-tobacco rates based on height and weight. So you will find after those charts, there will be build charts that show if they have this height and weight, what they will qualify for. And again, keep in mind that there are different charts based on whether you're applying for permanent coverage or term coverage. And I do see people getting those charts mixed up. So make sure you're looking in there. Someone might be in great health, but their height and weight is just off, and they're not going to get the rate you've quoted because that chart shows otherwise. Now, those charts are extremely generous. And I would say from my experience in the industry, extremely generous. If you're not aware, most people would be considered standard between 19 and 25, a BMI of 19 to 25. And we allow standard rates much higher weights than that, much higher BMIs. Granted, BMI is an outlier when it comes to certain types of insureds that are on extreme ends. And those might, require further investigation. But we've had plenty of people come in and say, well, he's just big. He's got a lot of muscle. Yes, he's still going to qualify for the rate that's eligible under our height and weight charts. Hey, he's an athlete and he's had a body fat analysis in a tank full of water where they actually figured out his mass ratios, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. Send those in. We'll take a look at it. To date, in my 30 years, I have never received such reports. They just aren't done on a regular basis. So yeah, let's see. Any questions on this particular case? All right, we're going to move on to case study number 2. Trevor, take it away.
All right, I've got the second case study. So we have a 50-year-old male applying for a $750,000 permanent product. The client was hesitant to provide his medical history information. However, the agent began asking those probing questions and ensured that all information would remain within the HIPAA compliance. The client advised on the application they've been diagnosed with diabetes since 2020. They're treated with metformin. The last A1C reading was 6.9. They've also been diagnosed with high blood pressure, treated with lisinopril, and have a last blood pressure reading of 120/89. The agent quoted standard non-tobacco on the application. The third-party reports that we got, such as LabPick and Milliman, matched the application, and we were able to approve at standard non-tobacco and move straight to issue. So the question with this one becomes, what did the agent do right with this application? What are your thoughts? Getting some good answers. So yep, disclosed all information, wrote everything since the beginning, asked the probing questions as the field underwriter, noted all the conditions in the medical history, gave true information, full disclosure on the medical information. So exactly right. A couple things. One, the agent quoted the appropriate rating. Like Jenna said about quoting a leader preferred versus standard and some of these other rates. It wasn't so much that they were promised to get a leader preferred or something like that without knowing their medical history, or in this case, with their medical history. And then we're having to go in and say, well, they're standard due to these reasons and having to resell the policy with that different rating. Another one was utilizing those probing questions and ensure the client that all information would remain confidential. Again, there is the HIPAA. We do take this seriously. So it's not like we're going around sharing this information outside of the organization or something like that to groups that don't need to know about it.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Any questions on that case study before we continue? Okay, let's see if we're up to date on some of the questions. So I'll give this to our panel of experts, Jenna and Trevor. If someone has a history of a stroke 1 year ago, can they apply for an IUL?
Let's see in here. I don't have that guideline memorized. I want to say it's 6 months.
I think Jenna's right at 6 months, but depending on the type of stroke and the severity of it, it can be up to, I think, 18 months before we will roll into offer reconsideration.
So what are we talking about when we talk about the severity of the stroke? Are they having residuals? You know, did they have a stroke, but they're fully functional, completely resolved? I'd also ask things like, was there an underlying cause for the stroke? If I see a young woman, age 34, that has a history of a stroke, I'm going to be thinking that isn't a normal age group for that type of medical condition. And so I might ask some more questions, like, was that due to birth control pills? Can be an indicator. More serious strokes are things where you have to do PT for a long time, or perhaps you never regain certain functions, whether it's cognitive or physical. You know, certainly there's going to be a higher risk involved in those cases. But again, if you don't have that information at the time of application, you know, we can ask specific questions or order requirements if absolutely necessary. We do try here on this team to ask more questions than we do order requirements. Because a lot of times insureds know their own medical history. They might not have realized that we needed that much detail, or, you know, or again, we don't expect you guys to know which detailed questions to ask, but we are going to do our best to ask questions and amend applications where we can, instead of ordering records, which, you know, we don't have any control over once we send out the request, and it can take weeks for a response from doctors' offices. And you know, that's something we all want to avoid if at all possible. But again, that's why we say the more information that's on the application, the less we have to hunt for.
Another good question,
Yeah.
real quick, was if the same client was applying for a term policy, will he get approved standard? In this case, yes, he would get approved the same rating standard non-tobacco. One thing that is important to note, though, typically when you're talking about certain conditions like diabetes or a history of a stroke, heart attack, what have you, you're going to have the same rating for a perm compared to a term product. But there are a couple differences with the term compared to a perm. One of them to call out, for instance, is the height and weight chart. So for instance, someone might be standard based on height and weight for a permanent product. They might be expressed 1 in a term product. The Life Guide has page 33 and 34, which have the height and weight charts for the permanent versus term product. So just something to kind of keep in mind if you're quoting, just because they get rated, you know, one way on one policy for height and weight doesn't mean they might not get a different rating on the other.
That's why we
Okay.
say those pages are so important to review, because there can be a difference. You know, certainly, again, if they have serious medical history where they're rated, the rating is going to be the same regardless of the plan type. But when you're looking at those parameters in those charts in the Life Learning Reference Guide, that can change what rate class someone gets.
So Jenna and Trevor, we've got a question in the Q&A box. So I'll read it and then we'll get your expertise. I have a client who is in her mid-50s. and her main attraction to our IUL is a lifetime income benefit rider. She was approved, understandably, an Express non-tobacco too. She now wants to cancel her policy because it's pretty much for dying, she said. My question is, how can you still offer a lifetime income benefit rider to this client since paying retirement income has nothing to do with the payout of illnesses? So why is it that we take riders away, minus terminal in some states, for Express 2?
So when we're talking about the Express 2 bucket, these people are inherently high risk. And we're not able to offer any of those added benefit riders at these higher risks. I will say that, again, in my industry knowledge, National Life is more generous in these particular situations than most companies, because a lot of companies will not offer benefits once you hit our version of Express 1. But when those risks are super high, we cannot offer any added benefit riders. The risks, because they are higher, there's going to be statistically more chances of claims on any of those ABRs. So unfortunately, at those higher risk classes, we can't offer them. Can we quote express standard non-tobacco while applying based on previous experience of a case? You absolutely can. Because that's what we're going to be looking for as part of our initial review. We're going to go back through the alpha search and say, hey, they had a previous policy. We're going to open that up and see what happened on this previous policy. How was it rated? And what has changed since then? So yes, you can absolutely, if you know something is going to be rateable based on experience, based on x-ray, you most certainly do not have to quote standard. That's not a given. Let's see, we had a denial due to a medication he was taking for a condition that he didn't have. He was given a medication in a foreign country and tried to get new meds here. The NP didn't check on him, just matched the meds. Yeah, okay, so if someone is taking a medication, there is a reason they're taking the medication. It's because they've either have a history of a condition or they have symptoms of a condition. We can't control if he goes to a doctor here and they don't investigate why he's taking that medication. I would question that because medications are expensive and you don't fill them for no reason. So that kind of tackles on another problem when I see multiple fills and someone says, but I don't take that medication. Then I'm going to wonder why are you filling them? Medications are expensive. And it doesn't make sense that someone would take them when they don't have a condition, particularly since a lot of serious medications can have side effects. And some of those side effects can be severe, especially if it's not to treat an actual problem. Let's see. How do we relay about the history and what the client did? You can give this story in the notes. We see things that you guys write on the cover letters or cover sheets when you send in an application. You can also include that in the details, pardon me, when you're asking those medical questions and someone answers yes. You can put all of those details. Now, if it's particularly complex, that might be something that we need to have a conversation about. I would leave it to the underwriter to actually do their review first because they'll know which questions to ask. I just see another pop-up that you have primary care now. Yes, we want to see medical records when his care is established here, but sometimes we're going to need to see medical records from the country they came from. And that is putting the onus on the insured to actually obtain those records and get them translated for National Life Group. That's something that's very rare that I have found here, even though we have a lot of folks that are foreign nationals or have come from a foreign country and been here for a while. We usually see their medical history from their current providers. And I think it's been very rare that I've ever had to ask anyone for records from another country.
Jenna, we've got another question, then we'll move on to easy underwriting. I have a client in underwriting that had severe headaches 14 years ago due to stress at work. She went to the ER and has not had any issues since. When we submitted her app, it stated in the third-party report of stroke history. We are having a hard time getting those records. What are some other options?
So this is one of those instances where I would say you need to open a dispute with the third-party carrier that has that information.
Right.
What happens when you open a dispute, whether it's Milliman or Exam One, they are going to reach out to the insured and the medical provider that coded that information to try and get what was the correct information. You know, I will say I have seen and or heard, although I don't want to, accuse anyone of doctors putting a code for a payment on a condition someone doesn't have. Maybe they're still investigating, and so they put stroke because those are the symptoms presented, and they don't go back and correct it. There are instances where doctors might upcode things because they get paid more based on the code they enter or how many codes they enter. I don't want to, accuse anyone of any of those activities. In my experience, they are pretty rare. But Milliman or Lab Picture are going to be the ones that can investigate that. National Life doesn't own these databases. We don't maintain them. So we're not able to, act on the insured's behalf. It's going to have to be them, not you guys. You're going to have the insured actually reach out to them. And there's multiple contacts with their phone, email, or their website to get copies of that information and to open a dispute. It can be a little time consuming. We understand that, but National Life really doesn't get involved in between those kind of disputes. A lot of times when people or a doctor indicates a certain diagnosis code, it may actually be correct. It just may not be the way the insured remembers what was happening, which is why we like to also receive full medical records so we can actually see what was going on here, what testing was done, what were the test results. So we can say there wasn't an actual stroke because we saw the CT and, it was just a headache. I hope that helps. I know someone just asked about HIV cases. Do we have time to talk about HIV here, Sarah, or do you want to, do we have, I know.
I want to make sure
Alright.
that I present on the new easy underwriting guides, and then let's keep the rest of the 10, 11 minutes that we have for absolutely any more questions. And you can give a brief introduction about the HIV cases. So
Sure.
let me go into our new easy underwriting limits. So these guidelines just were implemented on the 24th of this month. So these new guidelines apply to permanent products and e-applications only. So if you have a paper application, this would not apply. So the ages for this range is 18 to 50. Coverage amounts 3 million and 1 to 5 million. And then ages 51 to 60, they would have easy underwriting between coverage amounts of 1 million and 1 to 3 million. So what this is now going to look like to qualify for easy underwriting is there will be an additional application question that will say, have you had a routine physical exam with age-appropriate screenings? So that means for some applicants, colonoscopies, mammograms, OBGYN appointments, those types of screening tests, prostate exams for men that we would need to see. So it's going to say age-appropriate screening tests completed within the last 12 months. Now, based on how that client answers, if they answer yes, our system will not make them have to complete exam and labs. We will just have the medical record requirement. That's all we will need. If they respond with no, then our system will add the exams and the APS requirement. So this is a new expansion of our easy underwriting guides. You're going to see that it's higher for coverage amounts, and we're really trying to get our applicants to not have to complete exam and labs, but we want to see those additional screenings just to make sure that they're good to go. They've had all the age appropriate things they need, and they're a great risk. So I wanted to make sure that we covered that. So now we can look at some additional questions.
I see someone wrote in a follow-up about the stroke history that was in their 20s. So I'm assuming if it was a long time ago, people that have had a stroke, even if this is in question, because maybe the records don't exist anymore. Even if you had a stroke, say 15 years ago, we're going to look at the current medical records and say 15 years ago, has that affected their mortality? And people that have mild stroke, and it was a long time ago and everything looks great now, that's not a rateable condition. I don't want to put a blanket statement that strokes from a long time are never rateable, but those are the cases we're going to look for, certain details and use our critical thinking skills to try and figure out, is this really a risk that's affecting current mortality or morbidity? And then
Can I add something to that, Jenna?
yeah,
Just something else to kind of keep in mind along that same thought process, especially when there's really old records or really old medical history. The same thing, if we have like a consumer report that's maybe indicating one thing compared to what the application was saying, and we do get records and we're trying to see, hey, yep, they have a history of a stroke, but it was over 20 years ago, or it was a TIA, which is considered like a mini stroke kind of thing. Well, if we get medical records and it's one visit with an OBGYN or something really minor, and it's just the client came in because they stubbed their toe and they just came to get some ibuprofen, we still have to do some additional investigation and some additional research. So we might be going back to the facility saying, hey, we only got one visit from 2024. Can you give us all records for the past 3 years or all records for the past 5 years? Because we're trying to find more of that history of past medical history. So that could be another reason for the delay potentially. Just something else to think about is, again, we need to do our due diligence. And that's where sometimes it can be a time lag because maybe we just didn't get all the records from the facility and we're still waiting.
I see 2 questions here, so I'm going to tackle the easier one about using labs from another company. State Farm, I used to work at State Farm for a long time, so I know they in general don't share their lab results with us. It would be something that the insured would have to provide. In my experience, the labs that we run are not usually run from other places. So perhaps a recent insurance exam we might be able to take a look at. Usually I get requests, well, they just had a physical. Can they submit that? And my answer is always, you can submit anything you want and I'll take a look at it. Unfortunately, though, most doctors, when you go in for your physical, run a CBC, which is a complete blood count, and a chem panel. Those things can tell a doctor a lot. They're not entirely useful for insurance purposes. We run a lot more tests. We run a lot of reflexive tests. And what that means is this, their liver functions were elevated. Let's run a hepatitis screen. There's just a lot more if something comes back yes, or positive, pardon me, that we're going to actually order additional records, or excuse me, additional lab work. It's automatically done. And these tests can be expensive. Like having someone run a nicotine test, a cocaine test, an HIV test, a hepatitis screening. These are all things that would cost an insurer hundreds of dollars. And so they are not done regularly in doctors' offices unless someone has presented, with a high risk, potential exposure, symptoms, which are going to be underwriting concerns in and of themselves. So in general, I'm going to say no. When it's doctor's offices, we are usually not able to use those exams. Many years ago, there used to be a thing called an executive exam that companies would do, and I'm talking about like in the 90s and the aughts, for top executives that were much more inclusive, that would include a vast majority or sometimes all of those tests, but they just aren't done anymore in this day and age, unfortunately. And then the more difficult question was the HIV question. So we do make offers on some folks with HIV. We only take the best offers. The last time I went in and checked, it was around a 10% of people that have HIV that we are able to accept, because the guidelines are very strict and the standards set very high on what we're able to consider. The guidelines are really complex. So I'm just going to give you the 2 basic ones that we look for when we're doing initial review before we get exams, before we order medical records. And that is that they have to be undetectable for at least 2 full years. And it can't be just, hey, Yeah, I say that I'm undetectable. It has to be verifiable in medical records. And their CD4 counts have to be greater than 350 and ideally above 500. Now, what is a CD4 count, Jenna? Well, it's a measurement of your immune system. And it's usually in the thousands or tens of thousands. And those with immune issues, they're going to be lower. When they're under 350, that's very dangerous. So those we're not able to make offers on. I can tell you the majority of HIV cases that I see, I can make a decision on almost immediately. And when I say make a decision on, usually, unfortunately, I can decline it because it's not meeting the bare minimum requirements for us to investigate further. If you have an HIV case, this is something you might want to put in X-ray to explore, just to find out what questions should I be asking, what do I, need. If you're uncomfortable with that, you do not have to. You can answer the question yes and continue on, and we will investigate. Like Sarah was saying before, we want you guys to feel comfortable asking questions. And certainly if you're not, that is okay. As long as you mark the question correctly, so we know there is a history of HIV we can pursue. It's when you're not comfortable asking even the question on the application, and so it's not answered, or it's answered incorrectly, that can be problematic. There are a lot more considerations made in HIV cases that are just too complex for a discussion without actual medical records. So those are the two that I will share with you. And again, it does not mean everyone is declined, but it does mean we're only accepting the very best cases out there.
So Jenna, we've got a question in the Q&A. A client who was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 1 in 2022, had a lumpectomy, treated with radiation, and went through acid infusion every 6 months until September 2025. She is now cancer-free, but is there a waiting period before she should apply?
My manual's not open because it's saying my password has expired. Isn't that convenient to actually go look up this particular case very specifically? But I will say that the first thing we're going to do is use when was treatment completed? And in this case, if they had treatment until 9/25, that's the date of completion. So there will be a waiting period before we're eligible, that we're able to make an offer. The specifics of what that waiting period is, I can't say without actually going into the manual. But that's something, Trevor, if you can look that up for me, or we can discuss, offline, either in phone call or email. And I see one with hepatitis B. Lifetime income rider was removed. Again, when someone has a history of hepatitis, and these are cases for active chronic hepatitis, where you would get all of the ABR riders removed, is usually when you're rated in Express 2. Again, these risks are too high for us to be able to offer accelerated benefits of any sort. When we're talking about the financial stability of the company, there comes a point when the risk is too high that we do not want to offer any of those accelerated benefits, because it is an early claim, basically. Hepatitis B, I know we get a lot of clients with hepatitis B history. And so I do want to point out there is a difference between someone having a history of hepatitis B where they've been treated or they cleared the infection, and those folks that have chronic hepatitis. So chronic hepatitis sometimes is treated, sometimes it isn't, sometimes treatment is unsuccessful. Those cases, depending on what kind of side effects there might be, or what kind of complications like liver function elevations or liver damage, are definitely going to be rated at the very minimum an Express 1 without critical or chronic. The confusion, I think, comes when we're talking about people that have recovered from hepatitis. So they had it once, they got treatment, or they cleared the infection on their own, and their screening lab work shows they no longer have active hepatitis. These folks, unfortunately, still do pose a future risk. There are long-term statistical risks of them developing cancer, unfortunately, even if they have cleared the infection. So these cases, we are only able to offer standard without the critical illness rider. So, even though we know they've cleared the virus, there are additional risks present. Kind of like when people have cancer and they, maybe they've been treated for the cancer and the cancer is standard at this point. But unfortunately, they had large doses of chemotherapy, which unfortunately in and of themselves pose an additional risk because they often can cause future different cancers. So there might be a rating for that. So kind of complex when we're talking about hepatitis. I'm seeing a lot of questions about lifetime income benefit riders. And again, I think to keep in mind, we don't offer accelerated riders on higher risk cases. And if you have a specific case that you're inquiring about, is probably something that needs to be reviewed with claims, not with new business underwriting.
And since we've gotten multiple questions about the lifetime income benefit rider, I will give you and me a breakdown of why we can't allow that rider at Express 2 ratings. So I know some people had questions on the retirement aspect of it and that kind of thing. So I think that would be helpful. So I'll provide that to you and me to send out.
I'm seeing real quick here, autism. I know we only have a couple minutes. Children with autism, first and foremost, they need to be at least over age 8 for us to consider. It's really hard to determine those very young ages, the severity of the autism. When they've been established for a while in school, that can help us considerably in understanding how severe their case is, whether they're in a regular class, whether they have an aide, whether in special classes. We're also going to consider things like, are there behavioral issues? Are there other nerve disorders or, psychiatric history? Unfortunately, there's some certain genetic conditions that can show up and complicate matters. But we can make offers on some people with autism as long as it is mild. We're usually looking for things like, are they in regular school? Are they doing well? Do they have any of these associated complications? Are they living independently if they're an adult? Those types of things. Let's see. If clients approve standard non-tobacco 2 in IUL, if they need more coverage, is that possible? Of course it's possible. Yeah, we don't, as long as financially they show eligibility for an additional amount of coverage, we certainly will consider that. Again, it'll most likely still be rated in Express 2 without riders, but there's no reason that we would automatically decline term coverage just because they have a permanent policy. Any other questions that are burning?
I know we have 1 more minute.
I will say thank you guys for being here. We love working with you guys very much. We love putting on these meetings with you to answer your questions, to really know what's on your mind. If there are things that come up that you have questions about after this meeting, we can address those as well. We really appreciate what you do. And if you haven't heard my little spiel, I want to remind you all that what we do every day is important. Everything that you do every single day makes a difference, one family at a time. And you guys, more than anyone, know what that feels like to be able to hand someone a check when they need it most, when they're going through the most difficult times in their life. So I don't want you to forget that when you have a rough day, you still matter. What you do matters. What we all do matters every single day. And we appreciate you for that.
All right. Okay, thank you, everybody. I know we just got one question in the chat. When will the next training schedule be? We will put on another underwriting training probably towards the end of February. And so we're going to look at some topics We'll try and gear that more towards maybe foreign nationals, New York juvenile guidelines, something more specific towards underwriting so that we can really be impactful and help you during your field underwriting process and get more clients in the door. So like Jenna said, thank you guys for participating with us. We love the informal of these presentations, getting you guys involved, asking us questions. Please keep those coming. I will reach out to you and me to give a breakdown of this presentation to send out to everybody, along with a breakdown on the lifetime income benefit rider. And if you need anything in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, to you and me, to our sales desk. But we appreciate your partnership and thank you for being with us.
Everybody stay warm and stay safe.
Have a good one, guys.